Welcome to the National Park Service Bent's Old Fort Historic Site in La Junta, Colorado. You are seeing today, ladies and gentlemen, the advent of the American Civil War coming into the West. What was once a fur trade post is now the center of a stagecoach era and a post office, a central post office upon this area up and down between Texas and Denver itself. It's an amazing period to start representing, and not one that is normally in our minds when we think about the West. We think about mountain men, we think about Indians, we think about fur trade. That's exactly what this post was rebuilt to represent back in 1976.
This afternoon we're at Bent's Fort and we are portraying Ford's Independent Company, Ford's Independent Company, Dodd's Independent Company, and the 1st Colorado Volunteers, who are all raised in Colorado territory. 1st Colorado was raised in multiple gold fields throughout the mining towns, Central City, Blackhawk, Georgetown, and the two independent companies. And what I mean by the term independent companies, one company had 80 men, one company had 70, versus 1st Colorado had 1,000 troops. And when I use the term independent company, they were independent in the entire campaign. They pretty much did what they wanted to do. They commandeered what food they wanted to commandeer when they could commandeer it. Ford's and Dodd's company were recruited out of Canyon City, Colorado in September through December of '61. They marched down to Fort Garland, which is in the San Luis Valley in Colorado. Dodd's company left in January, marched down to Santa Fe, New Mexico. At the time, Santa Fe, New Mexico and Fort Marcy was one of the smaller depots there. They were equipped with uniforms and equipment. Dodd's company went down and fought in the Battle of Val Verde in February of 1862. So they were the first Colorado troops to be engaged.
Why am I here? Well, I'm representing an agent of the government who's here to check on New Mexico and the feelings of the population down there after the defeat of most of the Confederates at the Battle of Glorieta. I'm supposed to take my information and go back and report to the General-in-Chief in Washington, D.C., Major General Halleck, and tell him what my feelings are about whether we need more defenses here and things that will support the area from any kind of intrusions.
What we're doing here is just representing Ford's Independent Company. During the Civil War, there was the 1st Colorado Regiment of Volunteers, and that was roughly 900 to 1,000 men. And so a regiment is made up of companies of roughly 100 men each. And there were also two independent companies, Ford's and Dodd's, and they were just detached from the 1st Regiment of Colorado Volunteers. They would eventually, at least Ford's would become part of the 2nd Colorado Regiment of Volunteer Infantry. And so we are out here just doing a little bit of a demonstration of the life of a Civil War soldier.
Today, we're portraying what you would see with a Ford or Dodd's company stationed here in 1864-65 during the stagecoach era. A lot of people don't realize Bent's Fort was a stage station during the Civil War and also a mail drop.
Mail is important. The stages would carry the mail. Passengers were a sideline. A postage stamp anywhere in the country during this period right now, 1863, is 3 cents for a ½ ounce. And you can mail it anywhere in the country. The stages for passengers, mostly for moving the mail. Stages are running anywhere from 2 or 3 times a week from Kansas City. And Bent's Fort's kind of a hub. Not only do we have the Santa Fe Trail stage company here, but other stage companies pass through here too. From here to Pueblo is a full day ride. 10 cents a mile. So from Kansas City to Santa Fe is $76 for a one-way ticket.
Probably one of the most unique things about all the Colorado troops, none of them were born in Colorado. So they were really all transplants, so to speak. But the unique thing about it, there were men from every state at that time in the Union, and not to mention probably half of Europe. Irish, German, a few Swedes, several English, a handful of Irish. So it was really a cosmopolitan unit. Colorado contributed 3 regiments during the Civil War. 1st Colorado, 2nd Colorado, 3rd Colorado. We were all infantry in the beginning, meaning we walked or we marched. They got smart out here pretty quick, and they gave us all horses and converted us to cavalry.
The one thing that differentiates the Civil War out west is that the soldiers had to march longer distances. See, for instance, the 1st Colorado Volunteers marching from Denver City, they marched in February of 1862 down to Fort Union in northern New Mexico, and after they got over Raton Pass, they covered the last 90 or so miles in about 36 hours. They did a forced march because they were told that Fort Union was under siege. So they had to really push themselves a lot more and stay wherever they could find shelter. They didn't have, a lot of tentage on campaign as, say, soldiers back east. Now, for instance, the larger white tents were replaced by smaller tents that today we would call pup tents. Each man was issued a shelter half, roughly 5 feet by 6 feet, and you'd button that together with somebody else, and that was a little 2-man tent. They didn't have those out here yet.
The unit that we represent, Ford's Independent Company and Dodd's Independent Company, we became the 2nd Colorado and fought back in Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, chasing Bloody Bill Anderson, Quantrell, Captain Todd, and Confederate guerrillas. A lot of people don't realize Missouri was a very hotbed in the western part of the Civil War. And it was, unfortunately, it was part of the 1st and 3rd Colorado that fought at the Sand Creek Massacre. The best book on our unit is written by Ellen Williams. She was an Army laundress attached to B Company. Her husband later on became a bugler in F Company. So she traveled with the Colorado troops through Colorado, New Mexico, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri during the Civil War. She took 2 children with her. She was also, aside being a laundress, she also did some cooking to a very slight extent, but did a lot of nursing of the soldiers when they were sick or convalescing.
So I'd like you to take a look at this. See what you think of the medicine chest itself, the way it's made, and the beautiful glass vials inside for the medicine. And think about that and what you think of it. It's a beautiful piece of workmanship. And the inletting of the brass plates is about perfect. And this was owned by a Mr. R.H. Wilson. Who Mr. Wilson was, I have no idea. I think our theme for the talk on medicine today comes from an Alabama private in the Confederate Army. And his his saying about medicine of that time period, and his rating of it is this: I believe the doctors kill more than they cure. The Industrial Revolution allowed for much more precise, exact measurements in making surgical instruments and equipment, and surgery developed to a fine art, with amputations being performed in less than 30 seconds. So with all these advances, there were more than 750,000 deaths among the military during the Civil War, and 2/3 of them were from disease, not from battle wounds.
So tell Sam how you got into reenacting.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting.
Oh boy, you guys don't have the time. All right, I'll try really quick.
Okay.
How I got into reenacting, we lived back east at Fort Meade. I came from a military family, and it was around this time of year, January, February, studying all the presidents, Abraham Lincoln, and things like that. And little Susie Hoban in class stood up and said, "I'm related to Abraham Lincoln." And I was a little furious, so I went home that night and asked my mother and father, do we have anybody in our family that fought in the Civil War? And my mother's family's all Polish, so they didn't come to the United States until the end of World War I. So my father's side of the family, Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, she is my great-great aunt. Her sister, Catherine Beecher, is my great-grandmother. So it kind of went from there. And, you know, living back east, we toured the Civil War battlefields, things of that nature. And I got my first Civil War cannonball at 6 years of age, and it's been a 12-step recovery program since.
Rob Barnes, who you talked to a few minutes ago, I met him back in 1995, and he was head of a group that was doing World War II living history. And so for about a year, I was doing World War II events, parades, that kind of thing. And then we started doing a timeline from Revolutionary War to current operations. So I started to branch out. So it wasn't until 2003 I did my very first Civil War event, which was down in New Mexico at a place called Golondrinas. It's a living history park. And they used to reenact the Battle of Glorieta Pass, which happened in March of 1862, which stopped the Confederate invasion of the New Mexico territory. And so I was hooked doing Civil War.
This is not cosplay, and we're not pretending. I have the correct period drawers on, which I will not model for you. All the buttonholes are hand-sewn buttonholes, and this is pretty much like you would see the an infantry company. The guys have the correct period glasses, uniforms, equipment, drill. This is kind of like a little snapshot, a day in the life of a Civil War soldier in the Southwest.
From a logistics standpoint, it's, in terms of being an infantryman, it's cost effective because you can just buy yourself a pound of gunpowder and some paper, and you can make your own cartridges. Whereas if you're doing later time periods where you have to use brass cartridges, that gets very, very pricey. And the other attraction to doing Civil War out here especially was I got to learn more about Colorado history and the history here just out in the Southwest. So it's been a fascinating journey for me. And I actually met my wife doing this hobby.
Oh gosh, I started
You've been doing this since the 70s, haven't you? Or
79.
79, yeah. So
I wanted to get black powder guns, and I joined a club in Colorado Springs and just started doing stuff. Then I heard about Bent's Fort. Well, they used to have what was called rendezvous down here, and there'd be big camps down here in the cottonwood trees. And then I met Mr. Luzader. I don't know if you've met him yet. Met him and got us all involved in coming down here and doing more serious things than just camping.
I teach this professionally and set up living history sites around the United States, Canada, Europe, and into Mexico. And I have been doing that for over 40 years. My interest developed because my father at one time was the chief historian of the American Revolution and the National Park Service. And he hated living history. So this is my rebellion against my father. Instead of going out and getting drunk, I do living history. And trust me, it was a great way to get back at him because we share the same name. And when someone would say, well, John Luzader did this and John Luzader did that, we had to define which John Luzader had done which. Father did not enjoy my doing the same thing. He wanted me to change my name, as a matter of fact, but it didn't work out. I find that living history gives the best representation to the public on the field to better understand the history that it has given us in our heritage. It's a hands-on moment. Instead of walking through a museum and not being able to touch the artifacts, you're getting to see the artifacts come to life in front of you. You get to smell the smoke, smell the horse crap on the ground, smell whether the fire is going really well, and smell the delicious odor of the food when it's being actually cooked for someone to eat and not as a display. You get to feel the cold and you get to ask somebody, and I'll use Mr. Denzel Duncan as an example. Did you sleep here last night? And his answer will be, yes, I did. Because he did sleep here, and it was 8 degrees last night, and he was bundled in his buffalo robe to a point that he didn't even want to get out to stoke the fire. So that is not something you can teach through a book. That's something someone can emote to you passionately from experience. That's what living history is hearing the people and the heritage talk and not just reading something off a page. The written word is important. It's how we research. But when you get out here, you see the passion that I love doing, living the history, experiencing the history, whether it's going anywhere from a canoe trip down a major river, or fighting a battle, or running a cattle industry, or driving a wagon, or being on horseback across the Santa Fe Trail. It's from the person's mouth and not from a book's page. That's why I do living history. That's why I'm here in 8-degree nights, bundled in my buffalo robe, listening to Mr. Duncan snore. Thank you for your time, and have a good day.